What's going on, guys? This is Joey Young coming at you an update video on my new Aquavas tanks. These are the 90cm version. So this is part one of the project slash build. There's going to be multiple parts. Obviously there's two tanks, so when I'm scaping one, you'll kind of get like a full build first, and then I'll kind of jump into the next tank when I'm, kind of coming with ideas. All right, so I wanted to film a couple parts initially to kind of show you guys the actual tank, the ideas that I want to do with the tanks, and also why I kind of downgraded slash upgrade really down to these tanks versus keeping the 125. All right, so in part one, the intro here, I want to kind of focus on why I downgraded and kind of give you guys a quick glance of what actually comes with the tank if you guys decide maybe in the future or possibly looking into ordering something similar, what you guys will get, what to expect, and what's not actually included in the setup. So let's answer the very first question. So why did I downgrade from my 125 to basically two tanks that equal a 125? So there's actually a couple factors that made me kind of do this jump or this downgrade. So the first thing was the soil. I knew that I had to eventually swap the soil because it was getting to the point where I wasn't really getting anything from the soil, and I was really supplementing from the liquid fertilizers and the root tabs. So I knew that eventually I needed to swap the soil out, and that's really just a big ordeal. So when I bought the 125, I bought it used, and the seals on the tank weren't the greatest. I bought it at basically a local pet store. They water tested it, it held water. And for me at the time, I didn't want to deal with the whole figuring out how to reseal, figuring how to deal with certain stuff. I was still kind of like fairly like new in terms of the do-it-yourself stuff. So I had the people do a water test, leak test pretty much on the fly. It didn't leak. I took it home. I did a water test myself. It didn't leak. So I kind of rode with it. But, actually looking at the seals closer, throughout the years, it looked really bad where I was kind of like bubbling to the point where I actually really needed to reseal it. Obviously, if you want to reseal a tank, again, you have to like literally wipe down the whole tank, tear it apart, let it dry, the whole ordeal of just basically starting over. All right, so when I started the 125, I pretty much like bought random stuff and kind of upgraded and downgraded and did a bunch of stuff, kind of trial and error throughout the years. And, for the most part, a lot of it worked out really well, but a lot of it was kind of rigged or ghetto rigged where I didn't really like the setup. It wasn't clean. It was like kind of like messy. I really just didn't like the way it was laid out, and also I had like to buy an extra filter to use it as a reactor for my CO2. It wasn't for me. I made it work, throughout the years, but that was the one thing that really bothered me, was that kind of setup, especially in the bottom of the 125. So another reason why I wanted to downgrade was I had a bunch of projects or ideas that I wanted to try and do, but because I had one big tank, it was kind of like an all or nothing kind of trial. So the one thing with discus, if you guys don't know, is they like higher temperature, and with higher temperatures, there's certain plants that can grow really well, and there's certain plants that don't grow really well at all. So when I had the 125, I was trying to experiment with a bunch of plants, but I had to experiment them at a higher temperature, so I was kind of losing a lot more plants than I really wanted to. The plants actually can adjust, eventually, but I had a lot of plants melt initially, and the plants that actually survived, they adjusted, and they did really well. But that whole process of, initially adjusting the plants to the higher temperature and then hopefully letting them grow out kind of sucked. And there was actually a few plants I wanted to grow that I could never grow just because the temperature was just way too hot for them. So now with two separate tanks, I can keep plants that, like high temperature or that are okay in high temperatures with the discus. And with the other tank, I can experiment with plants that don't do well in high temp. It also can kind of save me an electrical cost when heating the tank. So another thing that drove me to kind of downgrading to a nicer setup is the way it looks. I really like a modern, clean look in tanks. I don't really like the whole like, slap it together or kind of just like slap in like a stand with wood and just like hope for the best. And it's it's just going to hold the tank up. I get it in terms of like cost savings and whatnot, but especially when these tanks are displayed in your living room and you're gonna have guests over, you want to kind of have it look at least presentable or nice. Not saying that the 125 looked bad. It looked really decent, but the way I initially, I guess, coated the paint and the way I painted it white, it didn't really look as smooth or as clean as it could be. Also, the black trim in the tank, especially in a big tank, it doesn't really look as clean or as modern. I really like the rimless tanks nowadays, and as you notice, like a lot of my tanks are rimless or I've gone to rimless. There's only a couple, I only really have 2 tanks that have rim. It's my 33 gallon, and that's really just like a kind of a breeding project, and I'm okay with, having a breeding project with having, the actual trim. Now, another thing that I really wanted to try was kind of like an all-in-one purchase or an all-in-one setup. I've never really bought an all-in-one setup. I've always bought like the tank separately, the filter separately, this separately, the stand separately, and kind of combine them and mesh them together. Just because, one, you normally get a better deal, better pricing if you kind of, shop around, buy this here, buy this there, and kind of like, this filter works way better than this filter. And so generally you get a way better deal. For me, this time around, I actually wanted to try an all-in-one kind of setup or build. For the most part, this is probably like 80% all-in-one. There is a couple things that are missing from here that I didn't get. I'll probably go over those items towards the end of the video once I kind of go over the things that you can expect to get if you end up, purchasing or looking into getting a tank like this. And finally, what really drove me to downgrade and actually buy this was the actual pricing of the actual tanks. So when I was actually looking into possibly downgrading to a smaller tank, the all-in-ones, I was actually really debating on getting the Red Sea reefers, one of those setup. So the price of the reefer was actually pretty high compared to these tanks that I got here. For example, a Red Sea reefer 250 is about equivalent of this tank. This is a 54 gallon tank. I think the reefer with the sump is about a 50 something gallon tank. And both of these setups with shipping was cheaper than the 250 reefer, to kind of put it in perspective. So I basically got 2 tanks for the price of one on a pretty much like an awesome deal, pretty much. So I've actually known about this company for a while and actually been eyeing them for a while, and actually was considering buying these tanks at some point, and especially if I ever, move or like get a newer house. I was actually considering getting some of these tanks for a modern look and actually for a cleaner build in the house. Not too long ago, I was just kind of browsing and I randomly came across their site again just to see, what the pricing was. And for the most part, the pricing, is still fairly high for these tanks if you buy like the complete kit with the filters and, this whole thing here. But I noticed that their starter kit pretty much doesn't come with a filter and doesn't come with a steel pipe. So I've noticed that the price was like super cheap, and I thought it was like some sort of typo, and actually emailed them. I was just like, hey, I noticed this, the tank prices are really cheap. Asked them a bunch of questions in terms of the quality of the build, where it's made, how it's shipped, ETA kind of thing. And they were like, no, we had a bunch built that was overstock, and we're just kind of trying to get rid of a bunch of them, and that's why it's so cheap. And I was like, wow. I was like, okay, well, sign me up for 2 because I'm looking to downgrade my 125 anyways. So pretty much that's the reason why I actually downgraded, was because of the pricing. Plus, the other factors of the tank. I had to tear it up eventually, reseal it. But yeah, so that's the story in terms of why I downgraded, and I got pretty much a really good deal on it. All right, so I don't want to keep this video too long, so I want to kind of go over the quick setup of this tank and what you guys can expect if you guys are looking to get something similar. I'll definitely leave the link below if you guys are interested in getting something like this. For your house or whatever. I think the prices went up, but keep an eye on it if you guys are in the market to buying a new tank. Alright, so let's start off at the top here. The top, it comes with a really nice LED. This LED is like super big. A lot of this build here is pretty much similar to ADA. So this is one of the reasons why I was kind of drawn to this company, and also drawn to the actual setup and the actual tank style. So the LED comes with 6 light bulbs. Each of them are 20 watts, so equivalent of 120 watts. And actually, that's 40 watts lower than actually what my max spec was doing per light. So I actually would save like 80 watts in electricity by just downgrading to something like this. Actually, they have 6 bulbs on here, and actually, you can remove them if you want to. The actual wiring in the light is 2 separate lights. You can actually run half and then run the other half later, or however you want to set it up based on your timer. Another thing that was really cool was these light stands. It came with these light stands that you can attach to the stands, and it kind of overlooks the tank, and you can hang the lights on here. I really like that a lot, because most of the other LEDs, you either have to place it on your tank or somehow rig it to your ceiling and hang it from there, or buy an aftermarket kind of like light hanger that really doesn't fit anything, part of your tank, part of your setup. I really like this because it's really durable. It's like it flows with the tank, and it seems like it's supposed to be part of the tank. It also comes with basically a top glass where you can actually put these brackets that hold a pretty much a glass piece on top to help with evaporation. It's cut shorter than the actual tank, so that you can actually fit both of the intake and outtake. Initially, when I looked at the stand, I grabbed it. I was like, oh man, this stand's gonna weigh like a ton. It's light as a feather. The coating on the actual stand is really nice. It doesn't look like it's some cheap paint. It's actually really nicely coated. It has really nice marks across the stands, and it just looks super modern. Another thing that's really cool is, the space in here is really big. They have these little magnetic, door clicks on the bottom here that basically clicks on there, kind of like your cabinet. Off on the side here, they have pre-made holes for your wiring, for your electric work, tubing, so like you're in and out. You can choose left or right. You're not limited to only the left side or something like that. You can run other tubing down here like CO2. You can actually probably fit some sort of like sump plumbing, because I think the hole is about 1 inch diameter, so you can probably fit like a sump in there with like an inch diameter plumbing down there if you really wanted to. Initially, I was considering using a sump for the filter, but after looking at the tank, I didn't want to drill into this like gorgeous tank and possibly jack it up. The 2 things that you can get that I didn't get with this setup, because this is a starter kit, is the steel pipes, the in and out take steel pipes. They're pretty much made out of stainless steel, and they hang on the side, and pretty much it's for fresh water only, because if you have salt water, it's going to rust possibly. You can use it probably because it's stainless steel, but there's chances of it can actually rust. But that didn't come with it. The other thing that didn't come with it was the filter. The filter is really similar to the ADA filter that I have on the waterfall tank. Obviously, it's going to be a lot bigger, suited for a 54-gallon tank. But basically, those 2 items didn't come in this package. If you are interested in getting those, they do have a complete all-in-one. Obviously, the price is going to be a lot higher. And I actually tried to negotiate some sort of deal with getting those 2 items along with this package, but they didn't have those, overstocked, so they couldn't give me any actual deals on those, and those were actually like full like retail pricing. So it didn't really make sense, because I can get something similar for a cheaper price. Alright guys, that was a really long intro, and I hope you guys enjoy the reasoning behind the downgrade, and also the quick run around of each of the items and everything you can expect if you decide to get something similar or looking into getting a new tank in the future. I hope you guys subscribe and stay tuned for part 2. part 2 will kind of probably go over the equipment that I'm going to be using for both tanks. A lot of it is duplicate, so I'm going to kind of just say, you know, I'm going to be using XYZ, and it's going to be probably shared across both tanks. So until next time, guys, peace.